Let's move around a bit. There we go.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Sports Community live stream. I'm Steve Pallas, and joining me again, like most Tuesdays from lockdown Victoria, from his basement office, Mike Ronchi. Mike, welcome with your COVID haircut.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, I made the most of the weekend, knowing that we were going to get locked down. So yeah, got value for money on the trim this time.
Got value for money. Yeah. Have
I'm feeling the cold too.
Yes. So we've been talking complaints over the last few Tuesdays, and we've gone from selection complaints to tribunal complaints to today we're on to complaints that are caused by what we call lack of club governance and coming out of the AGM process. So in your previous role as the long-term member protection officer for Cricket Victoria, what sorts of complaints have come over your desk in this space?
Yeah, quite a few. Just not following proper procedure policies and governance is the main problem, I guess, coming from complaints that came over our desks at times.
So what sort of complaints? What were the topics that would come through?
Look, you had your issues at AGMs, so your annual general meetings not being run properly or efficiently or not according to clubs' constitutions or rules. You might have had a situation where a couple of different parties had different agendas and certain policies, and I guess the steps to propose and endorse. It's critical if you're trying to make, major resolutions or special resolutions that the club, whose AGM it is, follows the governance fairly strictly. Your common rules around incorporated associations is that members need to be notified of the AGM 21 days prior. Usually clubs will also, or constitutions will also have nominations must be in prior 7 days of the date on an official form, nominated and seconded by other members as well. So if you're trying to do something that is a special proposal or trying to change something, if you don't have your paperwork in order, you can come undone very quickly. And that's the most common, I guess, complaints and people seeking information about, it was run like this and run like that. Is that correct and whatnot?
Yeah, it's no doubt the two things that this comes across sports community is not following the act and the club rules. The other one that always seems, particularly in contentious votes, is either not inviting all the members. And one of the key parts of club rules and the legislation of all states and territories is that all voting members must be invited to attend the meeting and be able to speak and vote accordingly. And so that comes with some challenges, because often clubs don't necessarily manage their membership database very well. And so often when you get to an AGM, there gets to a scenario where they actually don't know who's a member and who's not a member. And therefore that then creates issues around inviting the right group of people. And then when someone rocks up to the meeting, are they actually eligible to vote or not to vote? So that membership database is a really critical key part of the process as well.
Absolutely. And if that's not kept up to date, firstly, that can get you into strife. But also, clubs have various levels of membership. You've got your normal playing membership. You might have a past player membership. You've got your life membership, and you've also got a social membership. And it's not all those categories are eligible to vote either. It depends on your rules again, how they're set up as to who can vote. And a very good very good example you were talking about before, where people get left off. Quite often, and I must admit I've been guilty myself, life members can be forgotten because they're not seen around the club all the time. However, they're crucial to being included in your AGM. And again, it depends on whether they're set up in your rules to be able to vote on club items. And of course, AGMs are when most clubs nominate their life member as well. So it's really important that everyone's in that meeting
to comment. Yeah, so because life membership can actually be quite a controversial topic in its own right. Did you get many life membership disputes coming across your desk?
No, I didn't. No, funnily enough, I didn't receive life membership complaints. No, but they can be controversial and contentious because you can get two groups in a room that will vote for, won't vote for, and then if you've missed people notifying people of the vote, that gets you into real strife. Then, if all of a sudden someone who, let's say, gets through with their membership on minimal people being there and voting because the other people, or the majority of people, weren't aware of the meeting.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a scenario that actually happened. I'll change the dates to make it make it a bit more. There was a club that had a very contentious vote, and they held this was a special general meeting, not an annual general meeting. They called a special general meeting, and it was very soon after the end of the financial year. So let's say it was 5 days after the end of the financial year. So what the power brokers within the club, so the president, the secretary, the executive, we might be called, they called a meeting really close after the end of the financial year. They got all their supporters to pay their subscriptions for the next financial year, and then only invited those paid up members to come to the special general meeting. Well, the full membership base came to the meeting, and it actually got quite heated and confrontational because the secretary with their membership base said, no, you're unfinancial, you're unfinancial, you're unfinancial, you can't come in. And that actually ended up, that one scenario actually ended up in actually the secretary copying quite a strong blow to the head. So they got right to physical confrontation. We kind of got called in to kind of broker the situation before it escalated completely out of control. Some would say getting a right hook to the jaw probably is out of control. But we came in and all we did was look at the rules of the club. And so we looked at the rules of the club, and it said that anyone can vote as you remained a member for 30 days after the end of the financial year. So the meeting was in between that. So everybody that was financial for the previous year was actually eligible to vote. And so what actually happened then, that the decision that was made, incorrectly and mischievously, was retrospectively wound back, and then another vote and another process was adopted completely. And I think from memory, this was a number of years ago, I think that whole committee actually got turfed out in the AGM following because they didn't act in good faith. They were mischievous, and the most important thing was they didn't follow the rules of their club.
Yeah, you can get a little mischievous with the rules if you're not acting in good faith, and you can manipulate them. But that's only really through the lack of knowledge of other people not knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
And again, your governance and your rules are critical. Every committee person should know and understand ideally should understand their club rules and their constitution. Even things as far as if there is an incident within the club and people are suspended or expelled or fined or disciplined in any sort of way, there is a really strict process to follow. You have to give the person 14 days notice. They have the right, they should have the right to appeal. There are quite a lot of rules within constitutions that committees are not aware of. And we
absolutely.
Sometimes we act on the spur of the moment, in the heat of the moment, and it might be coming from a good place and it might be correct, but if it's not done in the correct way, or following the rules, that person may still be able to appeal or get out of any sanction that they really should deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the governance is where we need to be following the procedures of the clubs, and it seems quite, I guess, anal in one regard to be talking about red tape and bureaucracy, but it's so important because the committee, one of their key legislative responsibilities under the Incorporated Associations Act, so an act of parliament, is to actually run the club on behalf of the members according to the rules of the club. And so often the disputes that we get involved in are because one party or another, A, didn't follow the rules, or B, didn't even know of the rules of their own club or policy or bylaws.
Yeah. And how often do we hear when there is a bit of controversy in a club, all of a sudden there's, half the club walk out and start a new club. There's a splinter club all of a sudden. And it's simply because they got themselves into a situation where they weren't following their rules appropriately.
Yeah, I'm just been Googling trying to find, there was a very high profile Melbourne equine sport club, so I won't name the club because I can't actually find the details specifically, that actually wanted to sell off a whole lot of their land, I think it was about, and again only invited a category of members to come and vote, and that, I think from memory, and I don't quote me on it, I think that dispute went all the way to the magistrates' court to then unwind the decision that had been made, and that was a number of years ago, but it was on the front page of the newspapers for many weeks. That dispute, which as soon as it occurred, I said to my wife over my Wheaties, I said, "There's no way that this is going to stand because they just breached the basic covenant that all members must be invited to vote on topics that are being presented to the membership as resolutions and special resolutions."
Yeah. And even down to simple committee meetings. You must have a quorum. And ideally you shouldn't be in a position where one person's just making decisions and forcing those through. Even at committee level, there should be, if there's any decision to be made, it should come down to a committee vote as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a misconception that the president runs the club. It's not the president that runs the club. It's the committee that run the club. They're responsible for running the club. So we do see that as an issue, that presidents turn into dictators. And again, don't follow the rules of the club. And the other scenario that we do see, and this is a really blurry line, is that the executive of the club, those key decision makers, typically president, treasurer, secretary, that executive will make the bulk of the decisions in isolation and not inform the committee of those decisions, or just tell them out of courtesy at the next committee meeting. And again, there's a real challenging line there between, well, what's efficient club operations and what's bureaucracy, and what's a committee decision, and what authority does the president have, which again, we can start to tie up some of those issues and levels of authority in position descriptions, and well-defined position descriptions.
Yeah, exactly right. And again, it's usually people who are in a position of power at a club. You would hope they know their rules and their constitutions, and sometimes they can use that to their advantage, where, again, committee decisions are being made with people being unaware of actually the proper process of doing it. So a president secretary or anyone really who comes across as knowing their constitution really well and presents a really good case, a lot of people, committee people, would sit there and say, "Oh, okay, he knows what he's talking about. We'll just go with it." Where in actual fact, he may not have been, she may not have been following proper guidelines or the rules of the club.
Yeah, so there's a common theme coming through these discussions over the last month is have really strong policies and procedures around the different parts of your club and follow those policies and procedures. Now, if you're a club that doesn't have a lot of policy and procedure in this governance space, these areas, well, everyone's going to have their club rules. So that's the absolute starting point. Your club rules must be on your website, and everyone should have access to the club rules and pointing to the club rules. But if you don't have policies and procedures around what we're talking about, member protection, child safety, selection, vilification, which we'll kind of look to talk about next week, discrimination, harassment, bullying, etc., then we can go to places like playbytherules.net.au that have got great templates that we can use and very quickly fill that gap. So, but it's not about, well, yes, having good policies and following their policies does help us minimize and in most cases eliminate complaints, but it's also the easiest way to run your club. You document your processes that work and then run them accordingly, roll people in, teach them how to do it, roll them out, follow it in. It's the easiest way to run your club.
You may have a club and an association that have absolute benchmark policies and procedures and guidelines and rules. However, your members and your stakeholders need to learn and understand them as well and digest them. And the first thing every good committee should do in their first committee after their AGM and they're rolling into a new season or a new year, the first thing they should do, any new committee members should be inducted properly. And the first thing you do is you give them the club rules or constitution to just digest. You don't have to learn it verbatim, but just get an understanding that is there for a guide. And if there's any controversy, issue or a question arising out of the management and running of a club, you should be able to go back to that constitution and rules and determine how best to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we might leave it there. Another area that we'll cover over coming weeks is conflict of interest as well, Ronk. So we'll there's still quite a few topics for us to unwrap and explore in this whole complaints and conflict. Notwithstanding, we haven't even delved into those that are created by social media and the like. So lots for us to talk about in future weeks. But I think for today, again, the theme is strong policies, strong procedures, know your club rules, and always follow them. And that will make it a lot easier for you to run your club, create a great experience for the people in your club, and not only help you deal with complaints, but stop them from occurring in the first place.
Yeah, it comes back to the word we've used in every one of these sessions. It's communication.
Yeah, communication. Beautiful. Well, Mike, for those that are watching online, thank you for being part of this sports community live stream. Tomorrow we've got just a great guest in Stella from the Bush Rangers Basketball Club as we explore doing sport differently. And then later in the week, Tidy HQ, Isaac Drury from Tidy HQ will join us on Thursday, and he'll talk about his platform, Tidy HQ, and how that can make it easier for volunteers, because that's what we do, Ronks. And then on Fridays, eSport Friday. So until tomorrow, I'm Steve Pallas, he's Mike Ronchi, and thank you for being part of our sports community.